Killer Instinct is one of the best fighting games I've ever played. It has this super fluid system of combos and flashy aspects, but also it has ways to break out of combos, and it has people to stop people from breaking out of combos with the counter breaker. It's got really cool shadow EX moves that you have to combo break 3 separate times in order to, get out of those combos. And just the entire system being so focused on combos makes it seem like it'd be like Dragon Ball FighterZ, where pretty much all you're fishing for in neutral is combo starters, and then you just work on a combo after that. But that's not it. There's so much more depth to the game with what you can do to get out or keep people in combos. And they keep really good track of why you would end combos certain ways. If you just want damage, if you want to have really good advantage on someone else's wake up, if you want to, okizeme as people call it, if you want to charge extra meter to use more expansive combos, like there's so much that goes into the gameplay of Killer Instinct that I can't recommend it enough. If you have an Xbox system or you have a Windows computer, you can get the game for free, and it's worth every penny. Also the single player aspects of the game, the survival mode, the shadow stuff that you can do, and the massive, expansive, like, story mode thing where you have to go fight Gargos before he appears is just an insane amount of single player content for a fighting game. And the training mode, along with the tutorial, is so ahead of its time. For when Killer Instinct came out, it was not regular to have things like frame advantage talked about in fighting games. It was not regular to have a tutorial teach you about hitboxes or having the ability to even display them in fighting games. So Killer Instinct is so ahead of its time, and it still stands as one of the best fighting games I've ever played. I'll probably play it on stream someday with Dinky, if I get the chance. Next up, I'm probably just going to go in order of what this list displays. Starting with several games that I have just never played. I can't even read the title of this one. Six star something or other. Then we get ARMS. I have to put ARMS in the decent category. Because ARMS, I know it's not a traditional fighting game, by any means. I fully understand that. And their unique systems and, like, the having to physically punch to do things is what seems like the only gimmick, but ARMS is way deeper than people give it credit for. ARMS is also very fun, King Vibes, I do agree. ARMS is an insanely fun game, with so much effort put into it. I actually really want a second ARMS game that can expand more on the single-player aspect. But every character has unique arcade endings. The actual... there's like this expansive gallery mode. I love the music. The music in ARMS is awesome. I'm actually happy that ARMS got representation in Smash. I just wish they would have picked any better character than Min Min. Because Min Min is probably one of the least interesting characters in ARMS. With one of the weakest gimmicks, in my opinion. But every character's unique gimmicks, combined with the unique movement style, with the dashing, being able to charge up your arms so they get slightly buffed, the different meta aspects of gameplay, the stages, and all that they add to the game. Surprisingly, ARMS is super deep. It just, content-wise, doesn't have a lot, and it is relatively easy, but man, if it weren't sold for like full price, then I would highly recommend people buying it, but it's not worth a full price game. It really isn't. There's such a lack of single player content, and the multiplayer and online content isn't really much to scoff at. And I should mention, you don't have to play with motion controls. I think it's a lot better, and most people play without motion controls, because you can do everything the motion controls can, but a lot easier with just a controller. So if you have a Pro Controller and you want to play a surprisingly deep fighting game with a lot of surprisingly interesting lore, then I would recommend it, honestly. But I can't say that... for me, it's still just decent. I have a lot of positive things to say, but in the negative aspects, some characters' gimmicks are... I see the dichotomy here between... Like, I don't think it's bad, but I can't say that it's, like, pretty good because of its price. Last I checked, it is still a full-price game and is not worth that amount of money. If it were any lower, I would move it up a tier. Because as it stands, the lack of single-player content, the multiplayer still being Nintendo Switch Online, and the different single-player modes are pretty weak overall. So I can't really recommend it too highly. Alright, but I talked about ARMS for a while. I've never played Battle Fantasia. Lethal League's not exactly a fighting game, but it is one of the single most fun and entertaining experiences I've ever had, with a surprising amount of single-player content, and it's perfect for its price point. Like, I highly recommend buying it, but I'll get back into that when I'm done with the rest of the list, and then I'll kind of have a better idea of where to put it. Brawlhalla, I'm also putting here, but not because I haven't played it, or that I don't think it's a true fighting game, but because it is free, which means also I'm putting Fantasy Strike here. So, Brawlhalla, to start there, it is a Smash clone. For a free game, you get a lot of characters you can play without having to pay money, and it rotates every week. You have a lot of fun crossover characters, like Rayman and some Street Fighter characters and all that stuff. It's expansive, it can be played competitively, but because it's free, you could put thousands of hours into this game, and you have not spent a penny, which would make it like an S-tier Technic. But because it's free, you literally get more value out of it because it's free if you just play it for like 20 minutes than you can out of any other game for actually paying money for it. So I can't count it as anything higher than that because it's free. Any free-to-play game, or game that I'm just not sure where to put, goes in this tier. And that brings me to Fantasy Strike. I actually paid for Fantasy Strike. I supported Sirlin Games because they made a fantastic fighting game that is one of the most simple and easy to understand games with more depth than any fighting game I've played. That's not... okay, that's an exaggeration. I'll admit, that's an exaggeration. But Fantasy Strike, it's on the Switch. You can get it for free right now. It has these insanely well thought out and extremely deep characters, and it's only got a super simple 6-button system, where you have a basic attack for your normals, a special attack, a C move that is resorted to some unique things, and a jump button for your 4 base buttons. Then you have a super button and a grab button. So everything is just one button inputs. There's no specific quarter circle motions you have to buffer. There's no special, like, crazy inputs you have to do for anything. So it's super easy to understand, but it's so deep with its mechanics. I would highly recommend it. I can't praise Fantasy Strike enough. I'm in the Sirlin Games Discord. I highly recommend checking them out and supporting their game because they put so much effort into making a fighting game that is just so deep, but so cheap. So I love it. It has a great style to it. The artists behind it are so good at what they do. It has some super unique character ideas, like the entirety of Quince. Seriously, check out Fantasy Strike if you haven't. Alright, this one just says Brawl, and it's a transparent image, but it's talking about Super Smash Bros. Brawl. And I know this might be a little bit nostalgic, but Brawl's pretty good. Super Smash Bros. Brawl is a fucking awesome video game. These are overall recommendations. I've talked a lot about single-player content and stuff that if you bought this game, it's worth your money. So, those top 3 games, the only problem with Third Strike is that the only thing it has single-player-wise is the arcade mode, but that's because it is an arcade game. ARMS, I criticized and said I couldn't put it any higher due to its lack of single-player content. And BlazBlue, because of its massive single-player content, I put above the bad tier, even though it's probably my least favorite of the Arc System Works, second least favorite of the Arc System Works fighting game series. I'm sorry, I really don't like Fighterz, but I'll get there, Because this is in general, and that's why I'm putting Brawl this high. Super Smash Bros. Brawl has the Subspace Emissary. It's so fun from a casual aspect. It's just competitively is the only place Super Smash Bros. Brawl lacks. It's got a bunch of fun collectibles. It has so much single-player content. It's a Smash game, and it's so fun with its mechanics. The problem is that if you're trying to play it competitively, you've only got, like, 3 characters you can choose, and one of them tends to be banned because of how good he is. And that is this fella behind me right here. This guy. This guy right here makes Brawl not necessarily the highest tier possible. And I'm sorry to say that, but you guys know Smash Bros. Brawl, so I won't harp on it much. Street Fighter Cross Tekken. It's decent. I don't have much to say about it, but Street Fighter Cross Tekken plays like a Street Fighter game, and it's good because it plays like a Street Fighter game. It's fun, and that's as much as I can say about it. I don't have too much experience with it from a competitive standpoint, so the best I can put it is decent. It's definitely not bad. I think it's worth the money because of just all the characters and all the effort that was put into it, but I can only put it in decent. Alright, Dive Kick's a really weird case, so I'm putting it down here. Dive Kick is a fighting game, a super cheap fighting game that's entire gimmick is that you can kill your opponent in one hit. The only things you can do in the game is 2 buttons. You can dive and you can kick. So you can't walk around, you can't block, you can only jump up in the air and dive down. But it is surprisingly deep for only having 2 buttons. I would recommend it because it's hilarious. It's got a character whose whole thing is that they can foot dive, which is just a hilarious reference to UMVC3. Dive Kick, best game ever made, but due to, once again, that kind of like free game and also just more gimmicky game stigma, which means I'm also putting Footsies down here. I saw it's down here somewhere. Footsies is also gonna make its way up to that tier. Just because Footsies is also the same case of a super deep game that's entire gimmick is that there's not much there. It strategically has very little content. So I have to put that in the not sure where to put, because I can't say don't play it because it's not very deep, but at the same time it's super cheap and I'd still recommend it, so I can't call it super great either, and I don't just want to put everything in decent that I don't know where to put, so. These 2 games, super solid. The Dead or Alive series. Okay, this is our first one that's going in bad. The Dead or Alive series is like a straight ripoff of Tekken. It has its own mechanics, it has its own characters, but I think most people know Dead or Alive as the fighting game series that made a spin-off beach volleyball game. By the way, I own said spin-off beach volleyball game. I might be able to find it somewhere in this house, but I'm not gonna torture you guys with it. But Dead or Alive, Dead or Alive's weird, man. It's notorious for. It's probably not Panna, so I also don't like the gameplay was. Dead or Alive is a ripoff of Tekken. It's actually more known for its spin-off volleyball series than the actual mainline series. It's notorious for over-sexualizing its female characters to an extreme degree. It's worse than SNK heroines, I'll say that. Not like the actual gameplay, but just their sexualization is too much. The actual gameplay is pretty okay, but the single-player content's lacking, and if you're gonna get a 3D fighter, I'd say get Virtua Fighter before getting DOA, man. The series is funny, and it's good as a joke, but man, I can't imagine spending, like, $100 on an Ultimate Edition of this game, because it's just not good. Fighting EX Layer I really want to play, but I never have, so I'm sorry about that. Cross Tag Battle I have like 200 hours in, and I can definitively say, I'm sorry. It's better than DOA, but it's bad. I have a lot of experience with BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle. It's the BlazBlue series crossing over with, it's another game on this list. I don't know where it is. But Persona 4 Arena, Under Night In-Birth, which is this guy right here, and a couple others, like this game right here, the main character's in it. But that crossover is not justified in its gameplay. The gameplay is deep. I actually find the gameplay to be deeper than Dragon Ball FighterZ. Like I said, we'll get there. It has a really good combo breaker system. I like the way the buttons are laid out. It's super fun. It actually has a good amount of single-player content. The problem is the root of the gameplay. Matches last for like 1 minute. It's just so easy to kill people. You're fighting with 2 characters, but it still runs a lot faster than your typical Street Fighter match. Like, a single round of Street Fighter is the entire match in BlazBlue Cross Tag. It just goes by so quickly. Where, like, I could go through, like, 30 fights in the survival mode in 30 minutes. Because of just how fast every match is. Its mechanics are pretty good. Like I said, I do like the gameplay, but the root of it is just, I have to call it bad, because matches just go so fast. The online is not great, especially on Switch, and it feels a little half-assed. Even with all the characters they added, it's not worth paying all that money for a game that you're probably not going to get a lot out of. And this is a guy who got a lot out of it. because I just played it a lot. It's one of the first games I got on the Switch, so I just played it for that reason. Alright, Capcom vs. SNK 2. I've never actually played it, but I know a lot about the Capcom vs. SNK series, and I'll put Tatsunoku vs. Capcom, which is down here somewhere, up there as well. Indecent. They are fun games, and they're cool crossovers with decently deep mechanics that set them apart from a lot of other fighting games, but I can't say much about them outside of that. So Tatsunoku vs. Capcom and Capcom vs. SNK are both going in the decent category. And I should mention these last 3 games I've never actually played before, which is why ARMS is still at the top of decent. Because I've at least played it, and I have a very good opinion on why it's decent. I'm saving Fighterz for later. KOF 14 is bad. It has a really... let's look at the character design in the game. These characters don't look very, very good. The art style in KOF 14... I keep getting stuff for KOF 15. KOF 14... this is KOF 15. Why can I not see anything related to KOF 14? King of Fighters 14 characters, please. Okay, this is what the art style looks like. These characters look a little weird. That's Kyo, Billy, Chang. They all look a little... Ugh. Sin, Incarnate. The characters don't look great. I really don't like the graphical style of KOF 14. It's ugly. I'll say that. I don't like it. The actual mechanics are okay. It's a traditional King of Fighters game. But considering the other King of Fighters games that are coming up, KOF 14's nothing to scoff at. Because you can play it online doesn't mean anything. It means nothing. It has really bad... I hate the max mode system in this game and in 13. Because it makes combos last forever. You can't get out of them. They are so hard to do. They kill your controller trying to do them. And even the easiest characters' combos are just ridiculous. The timing when you have to cancel things is weird in all the KOF games. But KOF 14 I have to call bad. And now that KOF 15 is out and did everything that 14 did infinitely better, I have to say that KOF 14 is bad. Because just play 15. 15's not on the list, because this list... The game just came out, so it's not on this list. Mortal Kombat 11. We'll get back to that. We'll get back to that. Alright, Marvel vs. Capcom 2. This is the first game that I would highly recommend. And, just real quick, just gotta put that one in. MVC 2 is a classic. I'm gonna take you for a ride. That gives me so much nostalgia. I love MVC 2. It is easily the best Marvel vs. Capcom game by a landslide. It has such good mechanics. It's not imbalanced to any degree. Okay, it is a little imbalanced. It's got a classic roster of characters. It's got, you know, like, from the Marvel side, you got Juggernaut, you got Wolverine, you still got the classic Capcom characters. You've got so much in MVC 2. It has such an awesome, deep system of mechanics. It's so fun, and I couldn't recommend it enough. Just check it out, alright? Soul Calibur 2. Pretty good, honestly. Soul Calibur 2 is a classic. It is pretty good. I would recommend it quite a bit. It's probably the best Soul Calibur game from my experience. The crossover characters are hilarious, if I'm remembering correctly. It's a lot of fun. I love a lot of the systems that they have in place. If you want the quintessential Soul Calibur game, I'd probably say it's either 2 or 3. Then we get to Soul Calibur 6. Soul Calibur 6 is just decent. But I have actually played it, which puts it above some of these games. Soul Calibur 6 is a pretty decent game. I had a lot of personal issues with it due to some issues I was having with my system at the time. it would keep resetting my controls, because I play with very specific control sets on Soul Calibur, and it would keep resetting them. Every time I opened the game, I had to completely reset what my control scheme was. And it was so annoying, so I don't like it because of that. But the fact that you can customize your own character is hilarious. There are some really funny custom characters you can play as. But I got very bored with the game very fast. The story mode is lacking. The other story mode is also lacking. And I don't know, man. It's just, it doesn't have the same charm to it. The crossover characters are cool and all, with Geralt and 2B being in the game, but man, I got so bored with it so fast, and so much faster than Soul Calibur 2, so I'm only putting 6 in decent. Still a good game, and for games that have customizable characters, like, goddamn, that alone puts it above the bad games on this list. Alright, Alpha 2, they chose over Alpha... Okay, Alpha 3 and Alpha 2 are both here, but I put them in the same caliber. I think I like Alpha 3 a little bit more, so this one's going in the extra editions. And I'll put Alpha 3 actually on the list. Up here in pretty good. And I'd say better than Soul Calibur 2. The Street Fighter Alpha series is not my favorite of any kind in the Street Fighter series. Would I play it over some of the older games? Yes. Would I play it over some of the newer games? No. Not in the slightest. Alpha plays a lot more like an anime fighter, and I don't like it because of it. The anime fighting games that I play, I think that Arc System Works does it best, and Street Fighter took a dive in there with the ability to air block and a lot of aerial movement focused on. They changed the grab input to both punches? Like, 2 punches at the same time grabs, which is really weird. I don't know why that's a thing in Alpha. It incentivizes really big, flashy combos. It incentivizes a lot of very interesting mechanics with the X-ism, A-ism, and V-ism, which would later be adapted into some other games. But overall, I think the systems and everything are really good. It's better than some other Street Fighter games I've played, but I think it's better than Alpha 2, even though Alpha 2 did have a bunch of fun secret characters. I like Alpha 3's secrets a little more, just because I think there are more secret characters in Alpha 2. Let's see, let's move on. Skullgirls, I've never played, but it is a surprisingly deep fighting game. It's really fun. I'm putting it in pretty good. I'll put it above Alpha 3. It's so fun, man. Actually, no, I might actually put it up here, because Skullgirls is such a fantastic game, you know? I love it so much. It has this insane style to it. It's got big bands, so you can play Megalovania when you kill someone. It's so good. I haven't played it myself to a very extensive degree, but I really want to. I might end up playing it a lot more on the channel eventually. Just a reminder, I've never played Smash Ultimate. I'm not sure where to put this. Street Fighter 2 Turbo. Classic Street Fighter game. Has all of that fun value to it with all the extra characters they added. It's got a lot of fun secrets. It's okay. It's better than Soul Calibur 6. I play more Street Fighter 2. But Street Fighter 2 Turbo, the definitive best Street Fighter 2 version. But I can't say it's better than Alpha, because Alpha just has that extra layer of depth to it. And overall, I know a lot of people love Street Fighter 2, but honestly, the newer games just expand on it so much, I can't put it... It's not bad, but I can't put it higher than decent. You get as much out of it as you would out of an arcade game back then. And if I were a kid growing up, I would love it. Growing up with Street Fighter 2, I'd love it a lot more. Tekken 7, holy fucking shit, dude. I love Tekken 7. I'll admit, Tekken is not my favorite fighting game series. Tekken... I do not like 3D fighters much. I really don't. Tekken is a series that is, I think, too deep for its own good. Every character has this super long move list that makes it a chore to try to learn a character. Pretty much, you have to solo main someone, and that's it. Like, the command inputs are weird, with you having to press forward, stall a little bit, and then do a diagonal input to do a move. Which I got used to that. I'm not a big fan of games where, like, sidestepping is super big and all that. You have to specifically time inputs. To do Electric Wind God Fist, it is a frame-perfect input every time you do it. Which means if you're perfect in every way doing it, you can pretty much 0 to death someone. And Tekken 7 is not necessarily the most balanced game out there, but when I'm talking about recommendation, when I'm talking about depth, even though I personally don't like Tekken, I can't put it any lower than almost the top. My personal preference makes it so I can't call it the best fighting games ever. So, I'm putting it up there. But god, man, if you're going to pick a 3D fighter, why pick where is it? This terrible game. When also, I forgot to say, KOF 14 is still better than it's still better than DOA. Why pick DOA? Why ever play DOA? To any degree. If Tekken is right there. It's so much better. It has such an expansive roster of characters without even having to pay any extra. It has a bowling minigame! Tekken 7 has a bowling minigame! What more can you ask, man? Guilty Gear's hard for me. I really don't want to call it decent. I really don't want to call it bad, either. I don't want to call it pretty good, though. It's in a weird phantom zone between these 3 tiers, which means I am putting it at the very bottom of decent. My reasoning being that Guilty Gear Zard is so needlessly complicated. The inputs and the balancing is just terrible. The inputs alone are just so hard. There are some characters' default special moves that are harder to input than their supers, or that are the same input as their supers. There are some extremely imbalanced things in the game, so from a competitive standpoint, I really don't like it. And there is no... You know what? I'm rethinking this. It is the best of the bad games. I don't want you to... Play Strive. Play Strive. Don't play Zard. Zard is so complicated. There is no casual scene for Zard because it is so complex in its gameplay. Like, needlessly so. The Guilty Gear series has a really cool and expansive story, but it's not a story mode that you play through, it's a story mode you watch. So you can just look it up on YouTube if you want to care about the story. I recommend checking it out. It's a really cool story. But the actual game is so complicated, there is no room for casual players. The only people who would play Guilty Gear Zard are people who care about the series and want to play it competitively. Unlike a lot of other games here where, you can kind of get away with doing fun, flashy combos in a Street Fighter game. Obviously, Skullgirls is known for its really fun, flashy combos and style. You can get away with all that stuff. You can get away with, mashing buttons and MVC and all that. But Zard, you can't. You just can't, man. You can't. It's horribly balanced. It is needlessly complicated. I have to say it's bad, man. I'm putting this up here. So I'll save that for later. Garo Mark of the Wolves is one of the best fighting games of all time. Okay, here we get the 2 Injustice games. Injustice 2 is top of decent. Injustice 1, don't play it. Just don't. When I get to MK11, I'll talk more about these games as well, so we'll save that for later. I know I've said that a lot, but we'll get there. This JoJo's Bizarre Adventure game is actually pretty good. I'm putting it at the bottom, but it's surprisingly good. It's a really good fighting game, actually. This JoJo's game is so fun, and is so loyal to the series. It's horribly balanced, but it's so stylish, and has a lot of content to it, that I think it's worth it. KOF 13. Okay, so I put 14 in bad. 13, top of decent. It's top of decent only because 15 outdid it. KOF 13 has some of the best sprite animation I've ever seen. It is so well animated. These sprites are just so cool. For all of these characters. Like, the pixel animation in this game, the fluidness of their animations and all of that, are just phenomenal. Like, look at all the frames on that. Of Kay just stancing up. Like, him turning his head and everything. This game is so good looking. With, like... I don't think this level of sprite animation will ever be topped. Which is why I said that this is the only game that rivals Street Fighter 3's unique sprite animation style. And also, there are custom colors in KOF 13. My problem still lies in the mechanics. Max mode and the general mechanics of the game. And you know what? No, I'm actually going to call this game pretty good. I'll put it above the JoJo's game because it has so much single-player content. It's so pretty. The stages are all so good looking. Every pixel animated sprite is awesome. The arcade endings are super well thought out with the single player content. My problem lies in a big portion of gameplay reliant on max mode. Max mode is something that exists in KOF 15, and it's something where you can cancel supers into KOF 15 without having to waste too much extra meter. So it's a way to deal a heck ton of extra damage. It's a way to extend your combos very slightly. I love how they did it in 15. In 13, it was at its worst. And in 14, it was just marginally better. But I still hated it in 14 enough to put it in bad. The max mode system in KOF 13, not only could you cancel supers into supers, you could cancel special moves into special moves, into special moves, into special moves, into a juggle, into another special move that cancels into a special move, into a super, into another super, into a Neo Max super move. It's too much. The screen had to scroll while doing combos, because there was just so much you could do in combos that also made it so characters could kill you really easily if they had all those inputs nailed. But the AI never really used max mode, which was very helpful. So that balancing and the fact that max mode was still mostly optional gives it a pass and puts it up to pretty good. I'd highly recommend it. I think just above it in the highly recommend category over here would be KOF 15 if it were on the list. Melee. Oh boy, Melee. I might get flack for this, either because I didn't put it low enough or I didn't put it high enough, but it's going, like, here. Super Smash Bros. Melee is a notorious game. Is a notoriously competitive game. Notorious for players that don't take showers. Notorious for being one of the most competitively deep and insanely technical fighting games, but at the same time, it's super imbalanced. There are characters that are flat out unviable in Melee at a top level, and the game seems to only be enjoyed competitively. And I think it's worse than Brawl because I'm talking overall here. Melee's overall content is pretty good. Especially, you know, it's a Smash title, it's really good. It's really good. There are a bunch of fun little Easter eggs, like how after the first thing in Adventure Mode you can fight Luigi instead of Mario, which is so funny. The collectible trophies and all that are really fun. But yeah, if you don't play Marth or any of the Spaceys, or you put a lot of time into Jigglypuff, you are just wasting your time with the game. Those are pretty much the only viable characters. There are some people who play Captain Falcon and Mario. And there's, like, a single, absolutely cracked Pikachu player out there. But otherwise, Dr. Mario. Regular Mario is just infinitely worse in that game. If only that would last. So, I have to put Melee in decent. Brawl, I would recommend because it's got that massive subspace emissary, it's got the collectibles, it's got so much single-player content, and you can play it online without having to use external sources. You can't quite do that for Melee. So Melee goes just underneath it. I hope you guys understand my point there. This is mostly opinionated, but Melee also just takes a lot of time to learn. So these other games that are above it, obviously it's better than the classic arcade titles that I put here. It's better than... actually, I think Soul Calibur 6 is a little bit better. And BlazBlue is definitely a little better than Street Fighter 2 Turbo. The rest of these games in decent are the ones that are only in decent because they're not bad. But the top end here are games that I still have fun playing and have a lot going for them that don't make them bad, above just you can get a lot out of them. For those of you curious, this is Mortal Kombat 9. Mortal Kombat 9, I'm going to put it at the very bottom of the pretty good tier. And to an extension, I'm putting MKX in the highly recommend section. Like I said, I have an entire thing I'm going to go over with NetherRealm, the Mortal Kombat series, why I put 11 here but 9 and 10 up here, and why the Injustice games are where they're placed, so just hold on for that. UMVC 3, okay, I might get flack for this, but UMVC 3 is bad, man. I'd rather play Cross Tag. There's a really good video out there, but UMVC 3 is so imbalanced. I really don't like the gameplay over MVC 2. It's, from a competitive standpoint, there's just so much going on. There are so many things you have to press. While it's fun at times, I really do not like UMVC 3. The roster's great and all, but the 3 characters were too much to juggle. The X mode system was so imbalanced, it is pretty much a way for most characters to just true combo you to death. And without any sort of escape measures like Infinite introduced, like, it's bad, man. And then Virgil's just easily the best character in the game, so it's got Smash 4 Bayonetta syndrome. I really don't like UMVC. Just play, okay, just play MVC 2, man. It's right there. Just play MVC 2. 3 and this piece of shit are lower for a reason. Alright, Nidhogg. I know Nidhogg's one of those games that I probably should be putting down here with Lethal League and Lethal League Blaze, but holy hell, man. This also goes for Nidhogg, too. Nidhogg is pretty good, dude. I love Nidhogg so much. I might make a separate distinction for these indie games, but Nidhogg is so good. And Nidhogg 2 is also fantastic. Get these games. They are so good. It is a game that incentivizes footsies. If you don't know what Nidhogg is, you have a little sword with you and you can put it up, down, or further down. Or keep it in the middle. And you can lunge or throw your weapon. You can also jump and dive kick because it's made by the same people who made dive kick. Which means it is incredibly deep, and your point is to run all the way to the end and get eaten by a giant worm called just the Worm. And yes, Dinky and I both own it, and we should definitely play it on stream. It has this insane style to it, especially in Nidhogg 2, and, oh my gosh, just play it, it's so fun. The entire game, you gotta run through all of these different scrolling screens, because after you kill your opponent, they take a second to respawn, and you gotta run as far across the screen as possible. And it's so fun. It does have a slight lack of content to it, and Nidhogg 2 makes up for that, and that's kind of why I'm putting it here. But it's cheap, man, and it's worth every penny, and more. PlayStation All-Stars. Is it critically bad? Probably not, but god damn, man, we have Melee on this list, we got Brawl on this list, we've got Brawlhalla even on this list, and PlayStation All-Stars is so bad in comparison. It's one of the worst, Smash clones I've ever seen, and Project M is a weird place to put. So I'm going to put in the not sure section. Project M is a mod for Smash Bros. Brawl that makes it play a lot like Melee. So it adds a lot to Brawl and plays like Melee here, so I guess I could kind of put it in the middle, but at the same time, it's extremely imbalanced, with a lot of really strange mechanics to it, and they add a lot of fun characters to it, especially with Project Plus, which technically isn't on this list. So I'm just not sure. I'm just not sure what to do with Project M. It's a mod. It's not its own game. Alright, Pokken Tournament. Pokken Tournament goes in decent above Soul Calibur 6. I got a lot more enjoyment out of it. In Melee's a little better than Soul Calibur 6. And I'd say it's better than Pokken 2. And King of Fighters is 2002 is probably the bottom of this. doing some rearranging. I think ARMS is still better than Melee, though. But that's just... I love ARMS, dude. And Justice 2, I'm going to move further down in decent and say that Pokken is better. Alright, Pokken Tournament, though. Pokken's good. Pokken's... I'm going off of DX here that has all of the extra DLC content from the original Wii U release. It's a good game, actually. It's really fun. I love the systems of it. I got obsessed with it for a while. It can be played competitively very well. I don't think it's too crazy imbalanced. The story mode is pretty fun to get through. The fun little arcade mode stuff's fun. The customization of your character is pretty great. I just wish there was more customization for the actual Pokemon you play as. It's pretty decent, man. I'd rather play ARMS just because ARMS has a lot more to it. And Melee to that same extent. But Pokken's good. It's good. It's so much more fun than some of these other games. I'm putting Injustice 2 higher than that. And Soul Calibur 6. But Pokken's good. It's okay. Power Rangers Battle for the Power Rangers Battle for the Grid, purely out of bias, goes all the way up to the pretty good section. I think it doesn't top Nidhogg, but it still is so good. Power Rangers Battle for the Grid is so fun, dude. It's so fun. Power Rangers Battle for the Grid is so fun. It's not balanced in the slightest, but it's fucking Power Rangers. It's got a kick-ass soundtrack. It's got a bunch of kick-ass characters, too. I can't recommend it enough, but it does suffer from a slight lack of content, and the balancing issues can't put it any higher than anything else I put on this list. But seriously, play it. Support the devs that created Power Rangers Battle for the Grid. That game is so good, dude. But Sam Show 5 Special? Samurai Showdown 5 Special is one of the single best arcade games I've ever played. I might have to put it up there with Alpha 3 as one of the best fighting games I've ever played, because god damn, man, it is good. It is good. Like, Samurai Showdown 5 is really well done. It's got an incredible system that goes towards it. It's insane, man. And I love it so dearly. The modern Samurai Showdown game that just came out is better, in my opinion, which unfortunately I don't think that's on this list. Like, I would put that up there with the highly recommend section. But Samurai Showdown 5 Special, when it comes to classic SNK fighting games, it's at the top, man. It's insane. Like, it's up there with KOF 98 as well. So I think I'll actually put it just under it, because I like 98 a little more. But it's good, man. It's good. But Super Street Fighter 4 Ultra, or Ultra Street Fighter 4, I don't know if I'll get flack for this, but the Street Fighter 4 series, I've played it a lot, and it's better than Street Fighter 2. This style looks really cool, but the in-game models in Street Fighter 4 are not good. But like this style that they had going on, this more cartoony style, the faces and all that, and characters' eyes would like pop out of their heads occasionally, and like it didn't look good. Seth looked pretty okay, but like these in-game models looked so cartoonish, which just doesn't sell Street Fighter to me. Street Fighter 4 is very important because it resurrected the idea of traditional fighters. At the time, anime fighting games were pretty powerful, and yes, I am playing Athena's theme. Street Fighter 4 was pretty popular because it's like a resurrection of that old series. It had been since the 90s since we got like a really good Street Fighter game. And Street Fighter 4 kind of resurrected the fighting game scene for a while because of its insane style, its insane combo ability, because that's what people wanted. I just think, in retrospect, it did it so poorly. But yeah, a lot of people call it the savior of fighting games, because this was in a time where shooters were really popular, like there were a lot of FPS games coming out, and the fighting game scene kind of died, and then Street Fighter 4 came out and was like the only relevant fighting game. But I think fighting games would have still had their more recent resurrection because of the release of like Tekken 7 and Smash Ultimate and stuff, so it's not like... it was the first game to really resurrect it, so I don't like it. It's just okay, man. I'd much rather play Street Fighter 3 for its really insane mechanics, or Garo, or especially Street Fighter 5. Smash 4 is bad. It is bad. I'd rather play Cross Tag than Smash 4. It's not the... I think it is the worst game in the series. Smash 4 is bad, man. It is incredibly imbalanced from a competitive standpoint, incredibly lacking in a single-player standpoint on both games that it released. The 3DS and the Wii U version are both lacking so much competitively, and lacking just so much content. I like the For Fun and For Glory system. I still like calling Smash Ultimate stuff For Glory. That's, the For Glory read, all that stuff. And I think the online system worked okay on the Wii U and all that. And I hate how the game didn't get enough recognition. But, man, it's so imbalanced. It's not as good stylistically. It doesn't have as much to do as in Brawl, or even Melee. So, at least there are more viable characters in Melee than there are in Smash 4, you know? It had its whole era of things. It's a cool rabbit hole to go down if you care about the Smash competitive scene, but man, I would never go out of my way to play Smash 4. I'd rather go out of my way to play the modded version of Smash 4 called Trash 4. So yeah, and now we're left with one game. We're down to the last one, Dragon Ball Fighterz. And I think I've mentioned this many, many, many times before, but Dragon Ball Fighterz is a game I have so much to say about, so for now, I am putting it at the very bottom of decent, and I will keep it there, and I will talk about it extensively later. Otherwise, we are now out of things to talk about, and fine, I put Smash Ultimate in the never played section as a joke, but I will actually put it somewhere. This game is bad, I hate it, never play it, terrible, worse than Smash 4, no, I'm kidding. I've hit a point where Smash Ultimate has become a game that when I look at all of these, and I look at everything that's here, I can't put it above Brawl. It's pretty good, but I'd much rather play Brawl for its single-player content, its music. Smash Ultimate is just such a disappointment. I've played it for 1,500 hours at this point, going strong. I still play it practically every day. And I've hit this point where this game has great single-player stuff, but not as good as Brawl's. Great competitive stuff, which is better than Brawl's. A bunch of extras and like a classic mode and all these fun extra modes that no one actually cares about. Of course, it's got the massive, expansive list of characters. It's got a bunch of representation from series I love. And it is a staple of modern fighting games, but good lord if it doesn't just make me so mad that Nintendo doesn't care about this game. Because of that, because of Nintendo hating on its own franchise, because no matter how much Sakurai tries to make the game more competitive, Nintendo kind of just doesn't let it happen. Because of its horrible online system that Brawl even did better, I can't put it any higher. And this is the list. This is the list. So there are a bunch of random-ass anime games. These are probably mostly Japan exclusives. A couple of these are just like Street Fighter EX I never really got my hands on. A couple of these are indie games I never played, like Punch Planet. But I think overall I've still played most of the important games on this list, or at least know so much about them to the point where I feel comfortable ranking them somewhere. But most of these bottom ones, I don't think most people have heard of before. I mean, I've heard of, like, Chaos Code. I know what 6-star, whatever the hell that thing is called. I've heard of it. I know about Fighting EX Layer. I know it's like a Capcom endorsed thing. I don't know about Puyo Puyo fighting games much, and I'm not sure why they count them. I'll put them next to each other, though, because they're friends. Yeah, otherwise, in my not sure section, A couple of these are dupes, like the extra Tekken games that, like, just play Tekken 7. These aren't really worth it. And Tekken Tag 2 is, I think, better than Tekken Tag 1, so there's really no point in ranking that one. Street Fighter 4 Remix Ultra is better, so just play that one. OG Smash Bros. Is just a weird place. This is a mod. There's already a KOF 98 on the board. This is another Guilty Gear game that I think Zard is just play Zard or just play Strive. Alpha 2 is kind of pointless because I think Alpha 3 is better. If I were to put them anywhere on the list, they're right next to each other, so... And then Footsies and Dive Kick, Fantasy Strike, and Brawlhalla are all games that are there. They're, like, fantastic indie games that teach people so much about fighting games, and a couple of these are free, or at least they're really cheap, so I don't feel comfortable grading them because I feel like I can't call them good or bad, because what they're trying to do, they excel at, but there's not much more to them above the surface. Except with Fantasy Strike, but because it's free, I can't really grade it. Lethal League and Lethal League Blaze are both fantastic games that, kind of like the Puyo Puyo Tetris thing, they're not really fighting games. But there's nothing better to call them. It's a game where you knock a baseball around. But I will say, if I were to grade them on games that are fun and that really should be played extensively, if this was just recommendations with all of these games, then Lethal League's fucking either highly recommend or best ever, because goddamn, Lethal League is so good. But I don't feel comfortable grading it for the sake of this list. Starting from the bottom, we have PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, which is probably the worst game on this list. Because it is a half-assed effort. It's a half-assed game. No matter how many representation you put in it, I don't think it's the worst fighting game ever, because there are some games on this list that just don't show up. Like, there's a different JoJo's Bizarre Adventure fighting game out there that is one of the most broken, horrible games out there, but because of its balance. So I would put that in bad or just don't play it at all. But PlayStation All-Stars is just such a half-assed effort. Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl was clearly made with a lot of effort from the devs to make it a very fun and competitively viable game. This is, at best, a party game you play for like 10 minutes and then shut off to play literally anything else. So just don't play it. Don't waste your money on PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. Just get one of the... get Brawlhalla, a free one that's a lot better. Or like the Multiverses that's coming out or something like that. Injustice 1 is so overshadowed by the second. It's so, like, bad in comparison. The actual story sucks. The game is just so... It's bad, man. The story sucks. There's not that same depth of customization as there is in Injustice 2. The gameplay is so imbalanced, and every character plays so samey. It's boring. It's not flashy at all. The supers are lame, except for, like, 2 of them. It's just so bad. I don't get how this game took off in popularity, but I am glad that it spawned Injustice 2, which has a lot more going for it. MVCI, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, aka Marvel vs. Capcom 4, but people don't like calling it Marvel vs. Capcom 4 because it is notoriously bad. I think it's slightly better than Injustice 1 just because I've played it a lot more than Injustice 1, but Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, when you look at the greats of Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and even what I said was pretty bad in UMVC 3, Infinite dropped the ball. It's now only back to 2 people, which was a disappointment for people who played Marvel vs. Capcom 3. So they dropped back down to 2 people, they introduced a bunch of new mechanics, but the style of the game is so basic looking. Like, the game doesn't even look good. Hold on. Like, also, just look at this game, man. Look at the Hulk here. Look at Dante. And then, like, this roster's... Like, you've got Strider, he's a classic. You've got, you know, Frank, he's a classic. Arthur's a classic. Mega Man and Zero are both here, that's fine. Nemesis. Like, a lot of this Capcom side's pretty good, because these are their first-party properties. Some of these are, like, beta arts that they use, granted. But then, like, Rocket Raccoon... And then Doctor Strange was kind of botched. Hawkeye, Ultron, Gamora. I'm glad they got Spider-Man and Iron Man still, and Thanos is cool. Nova's a classic, and he was the buggiest character in UMVC 3. But God, they dropped the ball so hard on this roster. Characters like Wolverine and Juggernaut aren't here. And then some characters like Ghost Rider here got so butchered in the long run that it just made things so bad, man. The style of the game looks terrible. The roster is so it's so disappointing. It's a terrible game too. Like, the actual gameplay is just so lackluster. It's not really balanced at all. The boss being Ultron Sigma, or Sigma Ultron, whatever it's called, was really creative, but executed very poorly. The actual characters, like Chris Redfield with his ridiculous-ass giant neck, were just dumb. Like, hold on, let me just, he doesn't look good. And then, like, his face and all his animations and stuff, this stage is super boring. And, like, the UI isn't super appealing either. Like, it's so lame, man. The game's lame. It doesn't live up to the incredible stylistic choices and just the incredible spectacle of the last two games that came before it. The more stylized, cartoonish style of UMVC3 is just so much better than MVCI trying to be more realistic. MVCI shouldn't look like Street Fighter. It should look like MVC, you know? And then MK11, I'm getting back to it. I'm going to breeze through the other tiers real quick, because I don't have much to say about the bad games. DOA is DOA. I think if you're going to play a 3D fighter, play Tekken, or Virtua Fighter, or anything better than this. This series is just here for boobs, and that's it. KOF 14 is way overshadowed by the game that came before it, and now the game that came after it. UMVC 3 is super imbalanced, and just doesn't live up to the incredible spectacle of Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and not nearly as iconic for that regard. Smash 4 is the worst Smash game behind the first, but the first, you can't really count it because it came out way earlier. But Smash 4 is disappointing with horrible single-player content, and a horrible competitive scene too. But I guess from a casual standpoint, you can have a little bit of fun with it. And it did introduce a lot of characters that really had their redemption arcs in Ultimate. BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle is for... I love the mechanics a lot more than Fighterz that I put barely above it. And the mechanics are well thought out, but the game just goes way too fast, and the single-player content's kind of disappointing. Guilty Gear Zard Rev 2, no matter what version of Guilty Gear Zard it is needlessly complicated, horribly balanced, and even though it can be entertaining to watch or to play or whatever, it's not for casual audiences, and the single-player content is very lacking, with the story only being observable and not playable. Which isn't a problem, but when you also don't really have an arcade mode of sorts, that makes it pretty lackluster. Or at least one as good as Strives. I have a whole rant about Fighterz, which is why it's at the very bottom of decent. I can't really call it bad because it's got a lot of faithfulness to Dragon Ball, and I still have played so much of it because it's fun. And because it's fun, it's decent, which Cross Tag's fun too, but it's just lacking. And it's not really worth... I got it on an insane discount, and that's why I give it a little slack. Otherwise, it's really not worth a full-price game. And Fighterz, they price gouge you to get everything out of it, and it's still not much. Persona 4 Arena, pretty okay. Tekken Tag 2 is okay, but play Tekken 7 instead. Tatsunoku vs. Capcom and Capcom vs. SNK, along with Street Fighter Cross Tekken, are all these cool crossover games that really are only the novelty of being crossovers with a lot of cool stuff going for them, but I can't really call them that great, just because I haven't played them that much. Turtles, Tournament Fighters, Sam Show 2, Street Fighter 2 Turbo are all classic arcade games that are really good, but by today's standards are lacking in content compared to what's at the top of the list. And also just are, despite being super well thought out, fighting games, and this one just being pure fun. It's not worth it to say that they're any better than decent. BlazBlue is a series that I'm very familiar with, but I just don't really like the mechanics of personally, so I put it down here. KOF 2002, it's not as good as 98 by any means, but it's still okay. Melee and Rivals of Aether are both very competitively oriented games, but Melee Honestly, I think Melee has the better casual aspects, so I'm putting it above Rivals. But single-player-wise, they're both decently lacking. And you pretty much only have to play competitively for them. There's not much of a casual scene for either. Which is why I think Pokken, from a casual standpoint, is a lot more fun. If people just want to buy it and play it, they can. Soul Calibur 6 can allow you to make extremely funny custom characters, and the characters they already have are pretty fun. And it's got a lot of single-player content, I just don't like it. Street Fighter 4, it revived the fighting game scene, but it's just okay. They added so much to it, but its overall style with, like, the ridiculously cartoony proportions, characters' eyes popping out of their heads when they, get hit by something or something like that, especially with Blanca. He does that a lot. It's good. It still has a classic arcade mode. The online's okay. It was worth it to have that game released. But Injustice 2 is a lot better than Injustice 1. There's a lot more customizability to the characters. They did care a little more about balance and uniqueness across characters. The ability to kind of set your own special moves that was introduced in MK11 really benefited. Alright, okay. I'm kind of going backwards and kind of jumping between NetherRealm games here, but Injustice 2 is good. It's good representation of the story as well, not going too overboard. The stupid-ass clash system's done a little better, but I still don't really like the mechanics of Injustice enough. But because of that customization and the ease of, like, running into the towers and just having some easy fun, it makes it better than the games before. And ARMS is the best game on the decent list, just because it's got so much effort and style poured into it. It's got an amazing soundtrack. Even though the arcade mode is probably the only single-player thing that's super-duper enjoyable, it's got so much you can do, and I really want to see it get fully optimized into a sequel. Up to the pretty good section, we have Power Rangers Battle for the Grid. Fantastic game, lacking a little in content, but if you're a Power Rangers fan and you want to spend like $20 for the time of your life, then this game is so good and so well thought out, but competitively speaking, it's a little imbalanced. I'm skipping Smash, I said enough. I say so much about this game when I play it every day that I don't need to talk about it on this list. I'm surprised Nidhogg made it this high, but to the same point, I'm not surprised. Nidhogg's a brilliantly thought out indie game. It's so much worth. It's so worth the price that you pay for it. It's so brilliantly designed. It's got such a good style to it, especially with Nidhogg 2, that I can't recommend it enough. You have to discover how amazing the game is yourself, because I can't really put it into words. But due to it being setting out to do one thing and only doing one thing, I can't say it's as good as the things that come above it. MK9 is awesome. It's got a cool tag team mode. The story's actually probably the best in any Mortal Kombat game. The actual mechanics are pretty fun. It introduced X-rays, which is super important to the series, and was such a good revival of a series that mostly at that time was viewed as a joke. But yeah, MK9, fantastically done. The crypt system that was introduced was super basic and rudimentary, but it was a very fun way to get customizable unlocks. And this game just revived Mortal Kombat for me. The fun crossover characters, with like Freddy Krueger being in the game, was just awesome. I just think that X did it better, but we'll get there when we get there. This JoJo's game is fucking awesome. Just check it out. I can't really put it into words because it's JoJo's, but it's awesome, man. It's pretty great. Sam Show 5 is like the best Sam Show game before the one that recently released. It's got a lot of fun single-player content with the arcade mode stuff. It's got this insane style to it. It's so entertaining. The background changes when you do supers or activate certain stances. And it's so well done. It's brilliantly done with its pixel animation, which can also be said for the two games that follow it. And this is like... Sam Show is such a good game because it's so focused on footsies and single hits. It's not so focused on ridiculous combos. Some characters have some ridiculous inputs for things, and I don't really like SMK for doing that. But Sam Show is fantastic. And actually, in retrospect, I think Under Night in Birth, while it is pretty good, I think it's the bottom of this list. Alright, moving on to KOF 98 and KOF 13, both brilliantly done fighting games. With the debate is more between which one of these is better, which 98 introduces or reintroduces a lot of classic teams. The new teams awesome. I love the boss team in the game. I love every character, every secret. The Ultimate Match Online was really well executed. But, 98's so good. Like, it's so good. It's, like I said, 94, 95, 96, 97, all of them are great games, but 98 brings that all together to this masterpiece of the KOF series. But 13 barely edges it out because it has brilliant sprite animation. You can customize every single color in the game for these sprites, and, you know, make every character your own to a degree. My only problem with it is max mode, but even then, the CPUs and the story mode and all the secrets and stuff that you can unlock never require you to use it. It's just trying to complete combo trials is a chore, and making the game optimal is just so hard with how hard it is to utilize max mode. Soul Calibur 2 is the quintessential Soul Calibur game. It's a classic. I think it also now moves a little bit further down, with Battle of the Grid barely edging it out. But Soul Calibur 2 is fantastic. I can't speak much to it because I'm not the biggest Soul Calibur fan, but I like it a lot more than Soul Calibur 6. It just means a lot more. And also, Alpha 3 moves beneath a lot of these other games, because the Alpha series, it edges out Battle for the Grid slightly, but it can't top what's above it. Alpha 3 is good, though. It's such a good game. Street Fighter, it's one of the most stylistic, most entertaining Street Fighters to play. There's so much more inputs. There's so many more inputs you have to consider. But it's not super balanced. Some of the stylistic choices I don't really appreciate, and it felt like it was trying to bite off more than it could chew with all the different Xism, Aism, all that stuff. And at the same time, it just can't... Street Fighter's not an anime fighter, and that's what they tried to make the Alpha series. Despite the Alpha series being so perfectly executed in a lot of ways, it's not as good as the mainline, so it's pretty good. And Super Smash Bros. Brawl is... I just don't recommend it, because it's hard to get your hands on it, and... You know, Ultimate, even though it's lower on this list, I'd still probably recommend Ultimate because it's just played a lot more nowadays. But Brawl, Super Smash Bros. Brawl is one of the best games I think Nintendo's ever created. I think it is the best Smash game in the series. It's brilliant. I just can't speak to how brilliant Brawl is anymore. The Subspace Emissary is this massively expansive story mode that just sells everything about Smash to the greatest degree. The new characters it introduced, it finally introduced some really solid crossover characters that weren't just from Nintendo properties. It's such a staple of gaming. Its music is iconic and classic. It's brilliant. I can't speak to its brilliance enough, and I really wish Ultimate would have adapted a similar single-player aspect, because if it did, it would edge out Brawl. But Brawl's single-player and casual aspects are just the best in the entire series. Even though Melee might be the best competitively, Brawl just tops the overall experience the best. It's great for kids, it's great for adults. It doesn't matter who you are, or even if you're into fighting games, Super Smash Bros. Brawl is a masterpiece. And I really want to see it get remastered or redone and put on Switch. Or even just a flat-out port. I'll take that. It's so good. It's so good. But the only reason I can't recommend it is that a lot of people can't get their hands on a Wii nowadays, or just, if they've played it, they already played it before. So for new players getting into the Smash series, Ultimate does it better. Brawl still has some really dumb mechanics, like the 1% tripping chance that just happens randomly. And it just still is so focused on the casual aspect that if you wanted to get into the competitive scene, I'd still recommend Ultimate. But if you want a really good casual Smash game, then Brawl is the no contest the best one. Alright, now for the highly recommended section. MKX is a game that I really didn't want to put this high. I have a prejudice against the Mortal Kombat games, and I said I'd talk about it later, so I'm going to talk about it. This is the last of the NetherRealm games that will ever see this high on the list. It's the only NetherRealm game that will see this high on the list, because NetherRealm as a studio for a long time was just trying to copy everybody else. Back in the day, when they made the first Mortal Kombat games, their big gimmick was that they didn't really care much about the actual gameplay. Every character had, like, the same basic punch combo, the uppercuts, the sweeps. It's so basic. So many characters played so similarly, but it had this style to it. It meshed a bunch of random army people with ninjas and cyborgs. It's such as this big tonal clash, and it was brilliant back in the day, especially because of the gore and the classic, like, oh god, it's so bloody and so ridiculous that made it sell. And then they saw the resurgence of 3D fighters with Tekken and Virtua Fighter and Dead or Alive being so popular, so they made their own series of 3D fighters with the later Mortal Kombats, and then up until Armageddon. And then those just started sucking, so they, for a long time, stayed dormant. Until a revival of Street Fighter. They realized that 2D fighters are going right back into style, and they should hop right back in with Mortal Kombat, making it a fantastic 2D fighter. And they did. And they only went up from there with MKX. But my problem with NetherRealm is that every character, they introduce a lot of universal mechanics. They're so focused on customizing characters that they're not focused on balance. They really don't understand frame data. They included it in MK11, but it means nothing. And also, combos aren't... Because frame data normally is really important for combos, because if you hit an attack that you recover 6 frames faster than your opponent on, and it hits, then you can do a move that takes 6 frames to start up, and it'll hit them. That doesn't matter in Mortal Kombat, because every combo is a preset sequence of buttons. Just pressing this button to this button to this button does a combo, and they can cancel that into a special move. So there's not really combo trials. You don't need to learn that stuff. You just need to memorize a basic set of inputs, which I hate. I hate doing that. And then MK11, the reason it's the worst, and I'll compare it a lot to MKX because of this. Actually, I'll hold off. I'll talk about Injustice first. Injustice is a series. They have a lot of... They've done, like, Mortal Kombat crosses over with DC and stuff. They have a lot of power with DC's characters, and they made a whole fighting game about it. They're so focused on customization and representing these DC characters, and I think they do that really well. It's just the actual gameplay is so lackluster. It's so bad. The universal mechanics are just lame. They don't really incentivize a lot of fishing for counter hits, except for with Mortal Kombat's lethal hit system they introduced. There's not a lot you get off of specific setups or anything. It's the entire gameplay is just doing the same sequence of safe but good combo moves. And it's just the same sequence of buttons over and over again, canceled into a special move. And the same optimal combo always works. And sometimes you can add meter to it or do a super to make it a little more flashy and special. But most of the charm of NetherRealm's games is the characters interact with each other a lot more in NetherRealm games. In Injustice, characters walk in and they have multiple different interactions depending on whoever they're talking to when they walk into a match. Whereas a lot of other fighting games, the character just stances up, says a fun, cool line, and then that's it. So I love NetherRealm for including all of that fun character interaction. Even characters you never think would actually say stuff to each other always have something to say. And then the clash system. Every character says something unique to every character. And it's brilliant. I love that level of inclusiveness. But the other thing, and it's a constant with NetherRealm's games, is towers. Instead of doing like a traditional arcade mode, they tend to do a sequence of fights that get harder as they go on, and it's a tower that gives you a reward. A lot of times this is how you unlock customizables, and they tend to build their systems a lot like how shooter games do it, where consistently building up a lot of strength and power over all kinds of like towers as you ascend. It gets harder, and then you get like skins and rewards and cosmetics and stuff. You don't really unlock a lot of important gameplay things like that, and I'm fine with that system. Like, unlocking new customizables is pretty much all you can do in those games, which is the problem. Because of how lackluster the gameplay is, you're only playing it to unlock just a lot of cosmetics, to make your characters look cooler and possibly give them different stats sometimes. And Injustice 2 did this a lot better than the first. The first game also had a general story mode that just sucked so much. But Injustice 2 topped that exponentially. And now moving to Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat, introduced in 9, were these towers and these, like, ascending of towers to get super high and get rewards and stuff. And it introduced the Crypt, where you could spend in-game currency to give yourself cosmetics and stuff. And then introduced in MK9, carried on brilliantly in MKX, is the X-Ray system, with their powerful supers that you break their opponent's bones. You have to build up a lot of meter over the course of the match. It's a big resource, but it's an armored move that comes out really fast. Sometimes it's even a projectile, and it just deals a ton of damage. The X-Rays. The X-Rays, were this fantastic system of supers that really it added so much to the already excessive gore that's in the game, and it just leveled it up to to an insane degree. And MKX, to praise that before I get into absolutely trashing MK11, MKX was brilliant in its way of implementing these X-ray systems, so you really want to try to land your super, but at the same time giving a lot of benefits to the EX moves, adding brutalities back into the mix that adds special ways to kill people before the finish him screen pops up. Also, the overall style of MKX was so dark and gritty, which fit really well with the introduction of more horror icons like a Xenomorph from Alien, Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th, and of course, like, you know, the Predator from Predator. Like, these horror icons are showing up in the game, and then some of the other characters like Triborg and Bo Raicho are really fun additions to the DLC roster. And it's clear that they were associating themselves with horror because of the gore and the brutality of horror. Like, they want to make these, you know, excessively gory games excessively gory for a reason. And then the brutalities were great. Almost every character has these insane fatalities that they can pull. Some of them callbacks to ones that were originally from the older games, and others that were not. It has a general story mode that's pretty decent. It's nothing much to scoff at, but it did continue for Mortal Kombat 9s, and I think it did it pretty well. NetherRealm's not always the best with their story modes, because we'll get there with MK11. But they are very entertaining to play through. And sometimes it is cool to add little extra bits of lore, but usually they have to shoehorn in a bunch of fights just so they can include all the characters and all the fighting and stuff. But the story about Shinnok rising back up and all that was also a cool callback back to way back when Shinnok was introduced. And also the addition of Quan Chi, who was originally introduced in the show, fun fact, the Mortal Kombat TV show, and then made his appearance in, I believe, Mortal Kombat 4. But the characters are just so well thought out. Their moves are really cool. I like all that. And for single-player content, the towers to get special little arcade endings was really cool. And I love the little test your might mode where you still just charge up and chop a bunch of bricks in half, which is also a callback to the older games. And then the test your luck mode was really fun, where it just randomly sets a bunch of features that show up. And then, of course, you know, there are all these fun little mini games to break up the monotony of like a giant tower, or make a whole tower out of them too. So the single player, and then the crypt was expanded on a little bit more. It's still very rudimentary, it's still on a very basic grid, but there were puzzles you had to solve in the crypt. That made it so certain unlockables you really felt like you earned, because you explored this crypt area, you earned all that cash to unlock certain things, you solved a puzzle of some kind, and then you found this chest, opened it up, and got a really cool little cosmetic or little extra title or something like that to use online. A lot of this is worse than MK11. When the game launched, the Towers of Time were genuinely unplayable. They would have the damage you dealt almost every match you did, which made it the last match in the tower was artificially difficult to the max. They did change this and fix the Towers of Time after a while, but the game is just bad, dude. The characters that they reintroduced and the redesigns are fine. I like the addition of new customizable things like what Injustice did. And the positives from the crypt are extra expanded on in MK11 with more puzzles, actual physical movement that you have to keep track of, an attack that you can do, and then excessively difficult ways to get a character's head and put it on a pike by doing a certain amount of fatalities with that character. Cool stuff, I guess. But MK11 really drops the ball in the gameplay, especially because it's not as gory. They clearly wanted to make the game a lot more T-rated than M-rated, which really hurts Mortal Kombat. Because the actual gameplay is never what people talk about with Mortal Kombat. They talk about the fatalities, they talk about the ways to kill your opponent, they talk about the X-rays. And I like the idea of implementing X-rays into regular gameplay. If you uppercut someone when they do a high attack and it counts as a counter hit, it breaks their jaw and then sends them extra high so you get a bonus combo afterward. Once in a match. And the lethal hits were a really good addition until they removed X-rays in favor of different supers, which just aren't as good at all. And then the ability to customize your moves is a problem I have with a lot of NetherRealm games, because it makes optimal and really unoptimal setups. I like the idea of building your own character and the way you want them to be played, but some of these moves are just pointless or worse than everything else in the game. It's bad, man. It's bad. MK11's towers still don't give you too many cosmetics, and there's so much artificial difficulty put in place even after they fix the whole having your damage thing, where it's like, alright, you can't land combos anymore because randomly in the match, on completely unpredictable intervals, projectile will just hit you from behind and you just get cheap shotted by it. So it's annoying, man. MK11 is just super annoying. The story, they just totally dropped the ball on and did the same thing they've done like 3 times now, where they just reset the timeline and that's how the story ends. And then they added an add-on to it that was even worse. So the story's worse. The towers are worse. The arcade endings are still there, and they're okay, and I'm okay with a lot of those. They're pretty funny. But they removed the gore. They removed the dark, gritty atmosphere of X. And they butchered the idea of what frame advantage should be. They removed a lot of really fun stage fatalities, and the fatalities are also so much worse. So everything that makes Mortal Kombat just isn't done well in MK11. And the guest characters are no longer horror icons, but action icons, like RoboCop and Rambo, which also shows their shift into style, not really taking physics into consideration, which they never really did. But it's not about the gore, it's not about the horrific mutilating your opponent, it's about doing cool shit for the sake of doing cool shit, and they decided to put action icons in to reinforce this idea. So really, I don't like any NetherRealm game. I think Mortal Kombat is the weakest of any fighting game series that I've mentioned today, because it just does not care about its competitive aspect at all. Just never try to play it competitively, especially Mortal Kombat 11. Dude, its single-player content sucks, its training mode sucks, it doesn't bring back any of the really cool minigames like the Test Your Might or Test Your Luck stuff from Mortal Kombat X. The guest characters aren't as cool or as interesting, and while I like the extra customization, I like the addition of what they added to the crypt, it can't make up for anything. Just don't play it. Buy Mortal Kombat XL, which is the one that adds all of the bonus content. That's what I'm asking for. Also, I have a problem with Mortal Kombat using regular numbers for every single game, except X, because it sounds cooler. That shows you a lot about NetherRealm, and I just want to point it out. But you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, X! And then 11, so they just totally skipped it. I also don't like how Street Fighter's doing that, with this Street Fighter 6 logo being just a regular-ass 6, instead of the Roman numeral 6. Alright, moving on to Tekken 7. It is the best of the 3D Fighter series. I would highly recommend playing it. It is, I think, the pinnacle of 3D fighters. If you want a 3D fighter that's really fun and is off of, like, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure or something, like, if you enjoy that, then I would recommend this game. But if you just want a good 3D fighter, Tekken is unbeat. 3D fighters are hard to master, and I think Tekken 7 has really gone through and mastered it. It's not super balanced. I didn't find it too crazy fun because of some stylistic choices, but my god, man, it's just so well thought out. Every move that a character has, which I'm talking like 130 moves each character has, is just brilliant. Like, it's all uses a specific purpose. Every single move you have has a specific purpose. Catching people sidestepping, catching people rolling while on the ground, tanking hits that if your opponent's trying to attack you, specifically countering only high or low types of attacks. Attacks that jump and avoid low attacks themselves, all that kind of stuff. And while I hate having to keep so much of that in mind, it makes it a really deep and intense game. If you really want to just solo main someone and play a really well thought out 3D fighter, Tekken 7's the way to go. DOA, fuck it. I hate it. Skullgirls is like the best indie fighting game series there is. Coming from some really talented people with a brilliant amount of style, Skullgirls is just so good. If you want like a really good anime fighter, even with lack of balance, I want you to support these people and just check out as much as you can about Skullgirls. I'm not going to harp on it too long because I haven't played much of the game myself, but I really do want to, and I really want people to understand that that's what I'm looking for. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is the last of my highly recommended. It is the best Marvel vs. Capcom game. It's one of the best Capcom games, period. Being this brilliantly done tag team fighter that's just insane. It's just so good. It has some of the most classic, iconic characters from the MVC series in it. It has the best and most fluid combo system. It's not excessively overdone like 3 and Infinite, where combos still last a while and are still super flashy, but you don't have to have the insane amount of BPM. I still think the game's a little imbalanced, but not nearly as bad as 3 or Infinite. And it's such a worthwhile experience with classic music and classic everything. It's the pinnacle of the Marvel vs. Capcom series. If they were to release a proper Marvel vs. Capcom 4, I'd really hope it would resemble the stylistic, incredible pixelated art of MVC 2, instead of the more realistic style they went for in Infinite, or at least go back to the cartoony style of 3. And now for my best fighting games ever. Street Fighter 3, Third Strike. While I don't think it's the best Street Fighter game, it is better than any Tekken game. It's better than any Smash game. It's better than any other popular 2D fighter franchise because it's got that universal parry. It's got the unique anti-zoning mechanics for every character. It's got that incredible balance between what characters are able to pull off. It's got the incredible style and combo ability of using different types of supers. It's got the customizability of being able to use different kinds of supers. It's got, innovative ways of doing everything. It's got brilliant, super well done pixel art that's only outmatched by KOF 13, and I really want that to go back into style. It's got it all. The new characters introduced in Street Fighter 3, the new generation, were a little controversial because we only had Ryu, we didn't really have Akuma, we didn't have Ken, we didn't have Chun-Li, but now Third Strike adds that, and they make them so unique and so powerful. It's just, the only problem with Third Strike is that it is an old arcade game. They didn't really consider too much of the single-player aspect because they wanted people to play it in an arcade against each other. And that can also be said for the next edition, which is Mark of the Wolves. Garo is just absolutely brilliant. Like, it is, without a doubt, the single best classic fighting game I've ever played. With so many insane stylistic choices, brilliant pixel art animation, an insane addition of characters, secret characters that are awesome to play and unlock, a really good story, and it just doesn't get enough recognition. I can't recommend it enough. It's one of the most well-built fighting games I have ever played. And that moves me to the modern well-built fighting games, starting with Killer Instinct. I talked about it a lot towards the start of this stream and or video, depending on how you're watching this. But Killer Instinct, man, it is so good. With an insanely good way to teach new players how to play. With a dojo that teaches you everything. Everything. It teaches you frame advantage. It teaches you really good spacing. It teaches you how different hitboxes work. I can't thank Killer Instinct enough for introducing me to how good a combo-based fighting game can be. And its combo system is so fluid and so well thought out. The ultra combos and the special stage kill combos are just, I can't praise Killer Instinct enough. I already did it to an insane extent, so I'm not gonna mess with it too much, but... And now, for what I think is the single best fighting game ever made. Street Fighter V. Now that Street Fighter 6 has been announced, I cannot be any more hyped for Street Fighter V. Street Fighter V, to start by being fair, Street Fighter V got off to a terrible start. It came out with a generally lacking roster of, characters some people didn't recognize from the Alpha series, and a bunch of new characters. It was missing Guile, who's like a staple of the series. It was missing Balrog. It was missing, so many characters. It had such lacking content, with the story mode not being available, so only individual character stories could be played, and they were so lackluster. But where we stand now with Champion Edition, with 40 playable characters that are all so incredibly unique, this game has the most fluid understanding of frame advantage that I've ever seen. The frame data is so well considered. And it's so well implemented into the game. And it's just... chef's kiss. Beautiful. The way to do combos and the V-trigger canceling, the supers are... I do think the supers are a little lacking at times. Being very, like, lame and unexciting. Some characters have some good ones, and they've tried to put an effort to add a lot more stylistic choices to characters. The animations are so... They have so much personality in them. When Abigail finishes his little EX Abby Punch and then does this little pop-off, it's adorable. It's wonderful. I love it so much. There's so many alternate costumes for characters that if you get Champion Edition, just come base with the game. I hate how Capcom gouges money out of people as much as they do with Street Fighter V, but the Champion Edition is just such a definitive... If this were where the Street Fighter series ended, I would not be. And of course, I've played it with mods, which enhanced my experience a little bit, but also Street Fighter V has the most single-player content I've ever seen in a fighting game. With an arcade mode that spans over every single game, with every character having up to 6 different endings that they can have from the arcade mode overall. Like, six endings that some characters have if they've been there since Street Fighter 1. And this just super expansive celebration of Street Fighter that's in the arcade mode. The individual character stories, the general story, which isn't good, but it's really just funny to watch. The mission mode, or not mission mode, but like the combo trials, the survival mode, the extra battle that can get you to unlock extra costumes. It's great. And the online's not terrible. It's really well done. I'm able to play cross-play with buddies of mine, and like it's nothing. And it's a shame that people who have Microsoft consoles couldn't play it, and because they can play Ultra Street Fighter 4 as much as they want, but Street Fighter 5 is just the definitively better game in my opinion. And I can't praise it enough. It's got such good style, it's got such good love to the series, it's got such a fluid understanding of balance and what frame data is. I can't praise it enough. And it is, I think it is the single best fighting game ever created. So, to end off this stream, and this video, if you're watching it in post, this is what the final list looks like. With my top 4, and then, going there. And just all these games that I've explained so thoroughly why I love so much, and why I don't. Just a reminder to check out Lethal League and Lethal League Blaze. Check out Fantasy Strike, Dive Kick, and Footsies, because they're games that really just teach so much about fighting games, or are just a total blast. And while I haven't played a lot of these games, I don't think these games would have really changed my opinions much on this list. I still think my top 4 wouldn't change at all. And I'm sorry for those who are fans of these games. I haven't heard of, like, any of them, other than, like, Street Fighter EX over here, and I have heard of, like, a couple of these. But I can't, like, say I've played them to an extent to where I can put them somewhere on the list. Everybody, have a good one. And I will hopefully see you guys again sometime for a different list, or just to play some of these fantastic or really shitty games if you want to see me do that. Peace!